Hannah woke up early that morning. The sun had barely risen, but she was already up, making breakfast for her family. As Hannah scrambled the eggs in the pan, she thought about her daughter, Ava. Ava had come home yesterday with her eyes red from crying. Hannah knew something was wrong, but Ava didn't want to talk about it. "Good morning, Mom," Ava said, walking into the kitchen. She looked sad and tired. Hannah smiled at her daughter. "Good morning, darling. Did you sleep well?" Ava just shrugged and sat at the table. Hannah placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. "Ava," Hannah said softly, "you know you can tell me anything, right?" Ava looked at her mother, her eyes filling with tears. "Mom, the kids at school, they're mean to me." Hannah's heart sank. She knelt down next to Ava and hugged her tightly. "Oh, my love," Hannah whispered. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Ava started to cry. "I was scared. They say horrible things about me and Emma. They push us and steal our lunch." Hannah felt anger well up inside her. How could someone be so cruel to his sweet Ava? That night, after Ava went to bed, Hannah talked to her husband, Daniel. "We need to do something," Hannah said. "We can't let this continue." Daniel sighed. "Hannah, I understand you're upset. But we have to be careful. These children's parents are important people in the city." Hannah looked at Daniel, surprised. "So what? That doesn't give them the right to hurt our daughter." Daniel tried to calm Hannah. I know. But maybe we should just transfer Ava to another school." Hannah shook her head. "No, Daniel. We're not running away. Ava deserves justice." That night, Hannah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Ava, about how to protect her. Then, she remembered something she had kept for a long time. The next morning, Hannah went to talk to Ava's teacher, Mr. King. "Mr. King," Hannah said, "I need you to help me. Ava is being bullied at school." Mr. King looked worried. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Johnson. But you know how kids are. Sometimes they pick on each other." Hannah felt the anger rising again. "This isn't bullying, Mr. King. It's bullying. It's wrong and it needs to stop." Mr. King sighed. "Maybe it would be better to transfer Ava to another school." Hannah left Mr. King's office frustrated and sad. Why didn't anyone want to help? She decided it was time to tell Daniel the truth. When he got home, she called him to talk. "Daniel," Hannah began, her voice shaking a little. "There's something I need to tell you about Ava." Daniel looked at her, worried. "What is it, Hannah?" Hannah took a deep breath. "Ava, she's not just our adopted daughter. She's my biological daughter." Daniel was silent for a moment, shocked. "Like this?" Hannah started to cry. "Before I met you, I was attacked. Ava is the result of that. I gave her up for adoption to protect her, to give her a better life. But when I saw her again years later, I couldn't let go there." Daniel hugged Hannah tightly. "Oh, Hannah. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "I was scared," Hannah said. "Afraid that you would see me differently. Afraid that people would judge Ava." Daniel held Hannah's face in his hands. "I love you, Hannah. And I love Ava. Nothing will change that." Hannah felt relieved to have told the truth. But she knew she still had a long way to go. In the days that followed, Hannah tried to talk to the other children's parents, the school principal, even the town mayor. But no one seemed to want to help. One night, as Hannah saw Ava sleeping, she made a decision. If no one was going to help her daughter, she would do it herself. It didn't matter what it took. Hannah looked into the mirror, determination in her eyes. She was going to infiltrate Ava's school. She was going to find out the truth about the bullying and bring justice for her daughter. Hannah looked at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized herself. His hair, once long and brown, was now short and dyed black. She wore teenage clothes and thick-rimmed glasses. Hannah took a deep breath. Today was the day she would begin her secret mission. "Are you sure about this?" Megan, Hannah's best friend, asked. Megan was the only one who knew about Hannah's crazy plan. Hannah nodded. I have to, Meg. For Ava. Megan hugged Hannah. Be careful, okay? And remember, your name is Holly now. Hannah, now Holly, entered Ava's school. Her heart was pounding. What if someone recognized her? What if your plan didn't work? In the classroom, Holly sat next to Ava. Ava looked at her curiously, but didn't recognize her. Hannah's heart ached. She wanted to hug her daughter, tell her everything would be okay. But he couldn't. Not yet. Classes started. Holly watched everything carefully. She saw how some students whispered and pointed at Ava. She saw how Ava shrank into her chair, trying to remain invisible. At halftime, Holly followed Ava out onto the patio. She saw a group of girls approach Ava and her friend Emma. Look, they're the losers. One of the girls, who seemed to be the leader, said. Ava and Emma tried to move away, but the girls surrounded them. Hey! Holly shouted, her heart pounding. Leave them alone. The girls turned to Holly, surprised. The leader took a step forward. And who are you to get involved? She asked threateningly. Holly swallowed. I'm new here. And I don't like seeing people being mistreated. The girl laughed. Well, Nova, you better learn how things work around here. Stay out of our way, or you'll regret it. Holly didn't back down. She looked into the girl's eyes. I'm not afraid of you. The girls seemed surprised by Holly's courage. They walked away, but not before casting threatening looks at Ava and Emma. When the attackers left, Ava and Emma looked at Holly with gratitude. Thank you, Ava said softly. No one has ever done this for us before. Hannah's heart broke when she heard this. She wanted so badly to hug her daughter at that moment. No need to thank me, Holly said. No one deserves to be treated like this. In the days that followed, Holly stayed close to Ava and Emma. She defended them when she could and tried to cheer them up. But the bullying didn't stop. It was as if the attackers were angrier with Holly's presence. One day, Holly saw something that shocked her. Professor Davis, who was supposed to be looking after the students during break, saw Ava being pushed by a group of boys. But instead of helping, he simply turned his back and walked away. Holly couldn't believe it. How could a teacher ignore something like that? She decided to follow Professor Davis. Hiding behind a tree, Holly saw the professor talking to a man she didn't know. They spoke quietly, but Holly could hear a few words. We can't let anyone find out, the man said. Don't worry, Professor Davis replied. No one will know about the money. Holly felt butterflies in her stomach. What were they talking about? What money was that? That night, Hannah told Megan everything. This is serious, Hannah, Megan said, worried. It seems like there's something very wrong going on at this school. Hannah agreed. I know. And I'm going to find out what it is. But things got even more complicated. At school, Holly noticed that Ava seemed increasingly sad and scared. One day, she saw purple marks on Ava's arm. Hannah's heart sank. Her daughter was being hurt, and she couldn't do anything without revealing who she was. Holly tried to talk to Ava about it. Ava, she said softly, if someone is hurting you, you need to tell an adult. Ava looked at Holly with eyes full of fear. I can't. They said if I told, it would be worse. Holly felt a mixture of anger and sadness. How had things gotten to this point? Meanwhile, Hannah continued her investigation. She and Megan discovered that there was a corruption scheme at the school. Money that should have been used to improve the school was being embezzled. One day, while Holly was in the bathroom at school, she heard familiar voices. It was the girls who always picked on Ava. Did you see Ava's face today? One of them laughed. She was almost crying. Holly felt anger rising inside her. She came out of the bathroom stall, facing the girls. Why do you do this? Holly asked, her voice shaking with anger. Why do they hurt others? The girls looked surprised for a moment, but then the leader stepped forward. Look, she's the defender of the weak, she sneered. You don't understand anything, do you? In this school, you're either the predator or the prey. Holly shook her head. It doesn't have to be this way. You can choose to be better. The girls laughed, but Holly saw something in their eyes. Fear? Sadness? She wasn't sure. That night, Hannah couldn't sleep. She thought about Ava, about the other children who were being bullied, about the corruption schemes she had uncovered. Everything seemed so big, so scary. And Hannah knew she couldn't give up. She had to keep going, for Ava and for all the other kids who needed help. As the sun rose, Hannah made a promise to herself. She was going to find out the truth, no matter what it took. She was going to protect her daughter and bring justice. The next day would be difficult, she knew. But Hannah was ready to face any challenge. Because that's what mothers do. They fight until the end for their children. Hannah woke up early that morning. The sun had barely risen, but she was already thinking about her plan. She knew that today would be an important day. At school, Holly, who was Hannah in disguise, walked the halls carefully. Her eyes were always alert, looking for clues about the bullying and corruption she had uncovered. Suddenly, Holly saw something that made her curious. Professor Davis entered a hidden room, looking around as if afraid of being seen. Holly waited a moment and then went to the door. She put her ear to the wood, trying to hear what was happening inside. We can't let anyone find out about the money. Holly heard Professor Davis's voice. If anyone finds out we're using the school's money for ourselves, we'll be in big trouble. Holly's heart beat faster. She had just heard proof that something very wrong was happening at the school. At that moment, Holly heard footsteps approaching. She ran and hid behind a closet. She saw Professor Davis leaving the room with a man she didn't know. The man looked important, with expensive clothes and a shiny watch. Don't worry, Davis, the man said. No one will find out. We have important people on our side. Holly felt butterflies in her stomach. Who were these important people? What else were they hiding? Later that day, Holly saw Ava crying in the school bathroom. Her mother's heart ached for not being able to hug her daughter and tell her everything would be okay. Ava, Holly said carefully. What happened? Ava looked at Holly with teary eyes. They took my diary. They said they'll read it to everyone tomorrow. Holly felt a mixture of anger and sadness. She knew she had to do something. Don't worry, Ava, Holly said. I'll help you. That night, Hannah called her friend Megan. Meg, I need your help, Hannah said. We have to get into school tonight. Megan was surprised. Hannah, this is dangerous. What if we get caught? Hannah took a deep breath. I know it's risky, but I have to do this for Ava. Megan agreed to help. They waited until night came and then went to school. Carefully, they entered through a window that Hannah had seen open earlier. Inside the school, everything was dark and silent. Hannah and Megan tiptoed around, afraid to make a sound. Let's look in the staff room, Hannah whispered. In the staff room, Hannah and Megan began looking for clues. They looked in drawers, cabinets, and even under tables. Suddenly, Hannah found something. It was a folder full of papers. Meg, look at this, Hannah said softly. The papers showed how the school's money was being misused. Instead of buying things for students, money was going into some people's bank accounts. This is terrible, Megan said. We have to tell someone. At that moment, they heard a noise. Someone was coming. Hannah and Megan quickly hid in a large closet. Through the keyhole, Hannah saw Professor Davis enter the room with the man in expensive clothes. Everything is ready for tomorrow, the man said. The mayor will announce that the school will win an award for being the best in the city. Professor Davis laughed. Perfect. No one will suspect anything. Hannah felt her heart pound. She had just discovered that even the mayor was involved in this wrong thing. When the men left, Hannah and Megan came out of the closet. We have to get out of here, Megan said, scared. They were almost at the door when they heard another voice. It was a voice Hannah knew well. What are you guys doing here? Hannah turned and saw Nick. Nick was someone from her past, someone she hadn't seen in a long time. Nick? Hannah said, surprised. What are you doing here? Nick looked angry. I work here now, Hannah. Or should I say, Holly? Hannah felt as if the ground had disappeared from beneath her feet. Nick knew who she really was. Nick, please, Hannah started to say, but Nick interrupted her. No, Hannah. You don't understand. I'm here to stop you. Hannah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Nick, who she had known for so long, was on the side of bad people. Why, Nick? Hannah asked, her voice shaking. Nick looked at her with anger in his eyes. Because you're the reason my brother died, Hannah. And now, I'm going to make you pay for it. Hannah felt like she had been punched in the stomach. She knew what Nick was talking about. It was a painful secret from her past, something she had tried to forget. But before Nick could do anything, Megan threw a chair in his path. Run, Hannah! Hannah and Megan ran through the school, with Nick behind them. They managed to get out and flee to the street. When they finally stopped running, Hannah fell to the ground, crying. What are we going to do now? Megan asked, hugging her friend. Hannah looked up at the starry sky. She knew things had gotten much more complicated. But she also knew she couldn't give up. We're going to keep fighting, Hannah said, wiping away tears. For Ava, for all the kids. We can't let them win. As they walked home, Hannah thought about everything she had discovered. The bullying, the corruption, Nick. It was a lot to deal with. But she knew she had toys fast. The sun had barely risen when Hannah woke up. She hadn't slept much, thinking about everything that happened the night before. Today was the day everything would change. Hannah looked at Ava, who was still sleeping. Her mother's heart ached when she thought of everything her daughter had been through. She placed a soft kiss on Ava's forehead and left the room. In the kitchen, Hannah found Daniel. He looked worried. Hannah, he said, there's something strange going on. I got a call from the mayor. He wants us to go to school today for a special ceremony. Hannah felt butterflies in her stomach. She knew it was today that everything would be revealed. Daniel, she said, holding her husband's hands, there's something I need to tell you. Hannah told Daniel everything. About how she had disguised herself as a student, about the corruption she discovered, about Nick. Daniel listened to everything in silence, his eyes growing wider and wider. Hannah, he said when she was finished, this is very dangerous. We have to call the police. Hannah shook her head. We can't. The mayor is involved. We don't know who we can trust. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Megan. Hannah, Megan said, her voice shaking. You need to come to school now. Something terrible is happening. Hannah and Daniel ran to school. When they got there, they saw a crowd of people in front of the building. Parents, students, teachers, everyone looked confused and scared. In the crowd, Hannah saw Ava. She ran to her daughter and hugged her tightly. Mom, Ava said, crying, the school building is making strange noises. Everyone is scared. Hannah looked at the school building. She could hear cracking sounds, as if the building was breaking apart. Suddenly the mayor appeared with a megaphone. Calm down, everyone, he said. There's nothing to worry about. We're here to celebrate our wonderful school. But before he could say anything else, a loud noise came from the building. Everyone looked up and saw pieces of the ceiling starting to fall. The building is going to collapse, someone shouted. Panic took over everyone. People started running and screaming. Hannah held Ava tightly, trying to protect her. At that moment, Hannah saw Nick. He was standing still, looking at the building with horror in his eyes. Nick! Hannah shouted. We have to do something. Nick looked at Hannah, and then at Ava. Something in his eyes changed. Ava, he said softly. She's my niece, isn't she? Hannah nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes, Nick. She's your brother's daughter. Nick stood still for a moment, as if thinking. Then, he ran towards the building. Nick! Hannah shouted. What are you doing? There are kids in there. Nick shouted back. We have to save them. Hannah looked at Daniel. Take care of Ava, she said, and then ran after Nick. Inside the building, Hannah and Nick found a group of scared children. They helped the children out, guiding them to the exit. But when they were almost at the door, the ceiling began to collapse. Nick pushed Hannah and the last kids out, but couldn't get out in time. "Nick!" Hannah shouted, seeing her friend trapped in the rubble. At that moment, the police and firefighters arrived. They started helping people and trying to save Nick. Meanwhile, the mayor tried to escape. But Megan, who had recorded everything on her cell phone, showed the evidence to the police. The mayor was arrested right there. Hours later, when the dust settled, Hannah was sitting with Ava and Daniel. They had just found out that Nick had been saved and was in the hospital. "Mom," Ava said, "you're a hero." Hannah smiled and hugged her daughter. "No, sweetheart. We are all heroes when we choose to do the right thing." In the days that followed, the truth about corruption at the school came to light. Professor Davis and others involved were arrested. The school would be rebuilt, this time with real materials and honest people in charge. Hannah visited Nick in the hospital. He was recovering well. "Hannah," Nick said, "I'm sorry. For everything." Hannah held Nick's hand. "It's okay, Nick. You saved a lot of lives today." Nick smiled. Can I meet Ava? I want to be a real uncle to her." Hannah nodded, tears in her eyes. "Of course you can." Weeks later, Hannah was back at school. This time, not as Holly, but as herself. She had been invited to speak to students about courage and doing the right thing. When she got on stage, she saw Ava in the audience, smiling at her. Hannah felt her heart fill with love and pride. "Children," Hannah began, "today I want to talk to you about something very important. About being brave, about standing up for what's right, and about never giving up on the people you love." As Hannah spoke, she knew her fight had been worth it. Ava was safe. The school was changing for the better. And she had helped make it happen. Hannah looked out the window at the blue sky. She knew there would be more challenges ahead. But now, she was ready to face them. Because that's what mothers do. They fight, they protect, and they never, ever give up. And so, with the sun shining outside and the love of her family warming her heart, Hannah knew everything would be okay. Because when we do the right thing, even when it's hard, we can change the world. One day at a time, one person at a time.